and head out and grab a quick cup of coffee.
Say again?
Let you go first and come this way?
You tell me, whichever you prefer.
Whatever you guys decide to do. So, Ambassador Tony Wayne will moderate this discussion and will introduce the panel. But let me just say that Ambassador, who's obviously a tremendous U.S. ambassador to Mexico while he was there, is now a fellow with us here at the Wilson Center. We're just delighted to have him here. He's been incredibly productive during his time with us, has led us into 4 or 5 new projects that we're embarking on, and somehow helps us lead all of them at the same time while he takes on other responsibilities in his life. So he hasn't slowed down a bit since he left government. But we're really happy to have you here at the Wilson Center, and thanks for agreeing to moderate this panel. Thank you all, obviously, to our panelists as well for joining us, for David, Randy, and Jose Martin. The floor is yours, Ambassador.
Thank you, Chris. Well, it's a great pleasure to be working with the Wilson Center and the Mexico Institute, and to be able to keep having Mexico as an important part of my agenda. As Chris said, I've learned that my staff shrunk to this. and that makes a big difference. But
Yes, it
we
does.
have a panel, an excellent panel here today with a lot of expertise and a lot of understanding of the importance of this border. It's a border, as Ambassador Gutierrez said, and we heard from the governor and others, that people have been working on and working at getting it to be more efficient and more secure for decades. It's a complicated process. We're going to hear a little bit about that. The problems themselves, a lot of times, are just tough. They're tough to work through. The bureaucratics on both sides of the border are really complicated to get changes and get them in place. And it's both, there's public and private sector complications to that as you try to get to standards and norms that can be accepted on both sides of the border. There are a lot of actors that get involved. Just looking at border infrastructure and all the work, all the players that have to get involved in that in both places and get agreement, and let alone get to setting priorities across that whole border. It's a very complicated process. But we're going to explore a little bit of that, a little bit of these challenges. David Aguilar has 35 years experience in the federal government working on the border law enforcement, is now in the private sector and out still working on all of these issues of supply chain security and everything related to this. But he brings a wealth of experience, including heading Customs and Border Patrol agency, which is our largest law enforcement agency in the U.S. government. And so and then Randy Hutchison with us has just recently come into the government as the chief counsel for the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, but she has many years of experience in these areas. And of course, given the thousands of trucks that cross the border and the long and difficult history of working on trucks between the two countries, it's a really important area to work on. And Jose Martin Garcia is coming up on his 25th anniversary working in Washington for the Mexican Finance Ministry at the Mexican Embassy. He's seen all the good and the bad of this relationship for many years, and has persisted in working for the good and getting it to a better place. And really, as Ambassador Gutierrez said, getting us to a more institutionalized relationship where things function well, and we have that continuity between changes of federal governments on both sides of that border. A border with $1.1 million per minute of commerce. That's a lot of commerce, a lot of jobs, a lot of well-being that depends on that border being secure and efficient. So let me ask David to start off talking, and then Randy, and then Jose Martin, please.
Thank you, Ambassador. It's great to be partnered up again. We did some work together when you were the ambassador, and really were outstanding at assisting in all these tough things that we undertook together, not only between us, but with our partners in Mexico and, of course, the border states also.
Thank you.
So it's great to be with this crowd. I will start off by saying that Mayor Darling, the Governor, Kirk, Russ, and all of the others, Congressman Cuellar and so forth, experts on the border, experts on what happens, know it very, very well. And I think that's one of the things that we need to do first and foremost is, and that's what we're accomplishing here today, is yell from the highest mountaintops, what is the reality of the border? What is actually happening? Where do we need to go? What can we build on? There has been a tremendous transformation of the border. I have had the outstanding good fortune of basically being born, bred, and raised on the border, 8 miles from the border. I did a 35-year career that was specific to border issues at and between the ports of entry. I lived through the transformation and had the very good fortune of actually participating in that transformation. When the ambassador was in Mexico, when Ambassador Jerónimo Gutierrez was the undersecretary for North America, we worked together on some of these things that have come to fruition, built a tremendous foundation that is where we are today. But a lot more needs to be done. So the good news is that the border is of high interest. The bad news is that the border is of high interest. And I say that for the following. When I was the chief of the Border Patrol and then Customs and Border Protection, I used to look for forcing functions to basically take a huge organization and move it in a direction, move it off center, is what I used to say. Because we often found ourselves high center, we found ourselves comfortable, we found ourselves stagnant, almost at a plateau. So a lot of times it took a forcing function. Forcing functions can take two roles. One is intentionally, and the other one is somebody makes a statement and causes that forcing function. We're there now. I think it is a good opportunity. NAFTA, the renegotiation, improving it, moving it forward, 25 years old. There are things that we have done right, things that we could do better, things that probably need to evolve into where we are today. So I see this as a good opportunity. This is a good opportunity to move us forward to where we need to guide the border going forward. Now, the other thing, before I get started on some of the things that I want to touch on, is that this type of grouping, and by the way, Chris, Duncan, and Andrew, thank you very much for continuing to bring this type of grouping together, because this is what, again, helps us push this forward to the rest of our countries, binational, our countries, that need to understand what's happening at our borders. So it's important for us, the 14 million, and I still include myself as one of the 14 million that live along the borders, our borders, to continue this effort that we're moving forward on. Now, what is it that we see on a daily basis? What is it that we manage on a daily basis? And what is it that the rest of our countries need to understand that will help modernize and evolve us to where we need to go? There are 4 things that basically are of high focus on the border: security, facilitation of trade, and I would add to that the terror. We don't often talk about that, but it is something that is lingering in the background. But it is security and facilitation. Then there is migration, the migration that is happening between our countries and through our countries also. Other than Mexicans coming through Mexico into the United States and continuing on into Canada, other OTMs coming in from throughout the world. The estimated population of migrant movement right now is over 244 million, 63 million political asylees throughout the world. So this is something that we're going to continue to live with going forth. Transnational crime that affects not only the security of the border, but the ability for trade to do its business, for obvious reasons that we all know. And then probably one of the most impacting things that our countries need to pay attention to, and we're focused on them, but they're very, very hard to work with, is alignment of policies, alignment of effort, alignment of mutual accords moving forward. The ambassador talked about some of the things: pre-clearance, pre-vetting, pre-inspection, all of these things. The vision is there, but we need to continue moving forward on how we get there. I will touch base very quickly on the following, because Sam, you brought it up about more manpower at CBP. Yes, CBP needs more manpower, but it goes way beyond that. In the immediate, should we provide more manpower? Absolutely. Use it smartly, use it effectively, and use it efficiently. But we cannot stop there. Concurrent with that is where else do we go from here? The limiting nature of the existing infrastructure that exists today, we can't grow it very fast. We cannot build bridges overnight. It's going to take us a while. We should look for that in the future. Alignment of how we move forward, where we build, how much we're going to spend, and to what degree it's going to go, absolutely moving forward on that. But concurrent answer to the problems that we have right now existing, data sharing, information sharing, technology application, leaning forward between our countries to make sure that we jump at every opportunity, leverage technology at every opportunity, and then leave the old way of thinking behind. That is probably one of the biggest challenges that we have, especially in some of the organizations that Jose and I are very familiar with. CBP, 63,000 employees. Over half of those are what I call, and they don't take this as an insult, I didn't take it as an insult, the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs were the ones of us that came from the old customs service, from the old immigration service, from the old agricultural service, pre-9/11. Well, now we're modernizing. Post-9/11, again, unfortunately, tragically, a forcing function that brought us together as one DHS that has made us the unified agency that we are. We need to continue moving in that direction. The vision is there. The hard part is making it happen. It is that sharing of proprietary information. But on the other side of that, technological capabilities exist today to apply technology in such a fashion to pierce that veil, is what I call it, that veil of privacy, of proprietorship, and extract only what we need, we being CBP and the other agencies, in order to facilitate that trade and enhance that security. Easier said than done, but can definitely be done. So moving forward, single window. Mexico actually beat us, the United States, to single window. When I first came into the world of trade, ACE, I couldn't even spell ACE. I wasn't sure what it was. Well, by the time I left as Customs Commissioner, we had advanced it tremendously. Now we're basically there. But guess what? We have Mexico single window, we have U.S. single window, and we have Canadian single window. Now, should we have a North American single window? My answer is yes. Is it going to happen tomorrow? Absolutely not. But in the meantime, moving towards that single window, one North American single window, how do we align to the degree that we can? How do we dovetail? How do we ensure that there is efficiency built in these tremendous machines that facilitate, that secure trade, and that provide for a much more efficient movement of that $1.5 billion worth of trade that happens every day? So a couple of terms that we have probably all heard at one time or another. Those of us, the fronterizos, we learned a term about 15, 20 years ago, intermestic, that the border is not international, the border is not domestic, it is intermestic. There is that correlation that we've been very good at co-creating over these years. Need to keep that. But that's juridical line centric. We need to expand that. How do we go from intermestic to a more interdependency of not only our border communities, but our states, our border states, and then a recognition that the border states are a gateway to, somebody mentioned Kansas a few minutes ago, to the Michigans, to the Wisconsins that don't have any idea of what the importance of that border is to them in their home state, in their home city. Taking it from interdependent to intereconomics, that there needs to be a recognition that there's intereconomics between our countries. And by the way, this includes, at some point, the North America region. And then the interrelationship necessities that exist there. Let me finish off because I think we've got about 6 to 8 minutes. The following. The question was asked a few minutes ago about walls. There are walls that need to be built, but there are walls that need to be built in a very calculated fashion. There are still some areas where we need to build some infrastructure. Any Border Patrol agent will tell you that. Any law enforcement agent regardless of what side of the border they reside on, will tell you, yes, there is need for infrastructure. Do we need 2,200 miles, 50-foot walls, solar powered or otherwise? The answer is no. We need to do it smartly. We're going to move in a very calculated fashion moving forward. But to me, and this is almost sacrilegious, the world that I came from, my background, for me to say this, we should be very interested, as interested or more interested, in the walls that we need to break down. Those walls are some of the following: the sharing of information, the reluctance to work together. The ambassador talked about it just a second ago. Yes, let's send out these teams, but we're scared at first. Well, let's break down some of those walls. Let the experts speak. Let the experts move forward. What are the walls that we need to break down? As an example, the pre-clearance, pre-inspection. Jose and I have talked about this before. We need to break down the walls that are keeping us from trusting each other, from having confidence in each other, from moving forward in a very binational way at our borders. We cannot build ports of entry overnight. We can take care of the technological movement by speeding it up, by applying the right way and breaking some of those walls down. So those are some of the things that I wanted to very basically touch on. The tremendous opportunities coming forward. Change is a necessity, and continuity of operations is something that is critically important, as was just proven at the World Trade Bridge in Laredo. Imagine the World Trade Bridge shutting down for a week. And I worked in Laredo. That was my first duty station. A tornado went by there. Amazing. But the impact was tremendous. But the relationships that we have built enabled us to very quickly move forward. Ambassador?
Thank you very much. Randy, please.
Thank you, Ambassador. And thanks to the Wilson Center for inviting me to be here today. I'm very honored to be with this very distinguished panel. And also thank you to all of you for being here today and for your interest in these important issues. As the ambassador said, I'm Randy Hutchinson. I'm the new Chief Counsel of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, and I'm joined today by two of my colleagues that I'd like to introduce. One is Elizabeth Earlywine. She is an attorney advisor in my Chief Counsel's office, and Deborah Strauss is a senior attorney advisor in my Chief Counsel's office. And both of them have a very strong expertise on border trucking issues. So I don't know if you guys can just raise your hand so they know who y'all are. And one of the reasons I brought them with is I've been in transportation and infrastructure issues. I've done them for over 30 years. I spent almost 13 years on Capitol Hill, and then I only half-jokingly say, and if any of you have worked on Capitol Hill, you will understand this, I left Capitol Hill and went to law school to get a break. And then I returned to Washington, D.C., and for the last 17 years, I've been in private practice. And I've covered a wide range of clients, including a number of transportation and technology clients. But I've only been in this new job here for 7 weeks. And as any of you who have started a new job know, that no matter how much background that you have in something, when you start a new job, you spend about the first 3 months drinking out of a fire hose. And so that's what I've been doing. And so I've got my security blanket, so to speak, that I have brought with me today. But my background in transportation has fostered in me a real commitment to safety issues. And that's a commitment that I take with me to the Department of Transportation each and every day. Our agency at FMCSA, our primary focus and our mission is to reduce crashes, fatalities, and injuries involving large trucks and buses. We have over 1,100 employees, and we oversee more than 500,000 commercial carriers and about 4.7 million active commercial driver license holders. And when I talk about my job, I tell people that I work for the agency that keeps America's economy running. And I do, because if you know, the vast majority of the goods and services that are shipped across our country go by trucks. And this is a big job, and it's one that we at FMCSA cannot do alone. And it's one reason why we have been working very closely with our counterparts in Mexico on a range of safety initiatives. And I'd like to just talk about two of them here today. First, we're making excellent progress on our $41 million Border Facilities Capital Improvement Program. This project provides safe and modern workspaces for 130 FMCSA border inspectors who are stationed at 28 ports of entry from Texas to California. These inspectors conduct more than 125,000 commercial vehicle inspections each year. This is a big responsibility, and it's also frequently done in a very challenging environment. But we want them to have a secure and modern facility so that they can focus on the important tasks that they have at hand. So the new facilities that we're putting in replace temporary trailers, often literally on the side of the road, and we're going to replace them with permanent structures featuring office space, inspection pits, and canopies, because they're often working in well over 100-degree heat. And we want to provide a safe working environment for our inspectors and also for the passengers who are impacted by bus inspections. We're working closely with Customs and Border Patrol, as well as the General Services Administration, to complete facility feasibility studies across the entire southern border. Customs and Border Patrol has approved 20 sites with 6 pending final review. And so far, we've had the opportunity to hold grand openings in the first 4 upgraded ports of entry. We have 3 in Texas and 1 in New Mexico. The next set of facility upgrades are in progress. There's 3 in Texas and 2 in Arizona, and we hope to complete construction on those by the end of the year. Bilaterally, we also have a lot going on as we're working together to build a safe and efficient highway network that spans North America. We all share a common interest in making sure that freight moves seamlessly and safely to help power our modern economies. We have made strides with our partners in the Mexican Secretariat of Communications and Transport, which is the acronym is SCT, and we've worked with them to help ensure that commercial vehicles and drivers are held to high standards of safety on either side of the border. And we've made the most progress in 3 areas. First, at FMCSA, we have recognized Mexico's motor carrier inspection standard so that a Mexican annual truck inspection complies with the annual inspection required by the United States. Second, on training, in the past 18 months, we have sent our experts to Mexico to help train 80 Mexican inspectors to conduct North American standard vehicle inspections. And as David was mentioned, we need more of that, where we're actually working together to make sure that we have one standard, or as close to one standard as we can possibly get to. And finally, on information sharing, this year we signed a revised and updated Memorandum of Understanding regarding commercial driver's license reciprocity. This updated MOU, which is the first revision since 1991, it helps to align more closely with our CDL standards and establishes a framework for addressing future concerns. So as you can see, the U.S. and Mexico, and specifically FMCSA and SCT, work pretty well together. We're proud of our successes that will help make a difference in the lives of millions of people across North America. But the job doesn't end there. We must continue to work closely to make our roadways safe, not only for the traveling public, but also to help truck and bus drivers return home safely to their families each and every day. Thank you for your interest today, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Randy.
Sure, thank you.
Jose.
Thank you. Is it on? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. And I have to say that it's an honor to share a panel with you, Ambassador, and with David and Randy. Before we start speaking about how close the relationship has become, I was thinking about the tornado because it was actually, it caused serious damages on both sides. We joke about it sometimes because we say that this tornado, we didn't know if it moved southbound or northbound or both ways, because tornadoes move that way. But it definitely moved legally both ways because it went through our port of entry, on the bridge, and through the other port of entry, and back. So it was a completely legal tornado. Caused a lot of destruction because it was not pre-vetted. So that's why.
There you go.
Anyway, let me. I brought a presentation that I would like to share with you. And basically, when I spoke to Chris or with Chris about the today's presentation, I told him that I was going to share with you an update of where we are in customs matters, particularly on the commercial side, and what we're doing between ports of entry, actually at the ports of entry. First of all, well, Ambassador Gutierrez just mentioned some of the cargo pre-inspection programs that we already have in place. Definitely, we started with these 3 pilots on the facilities of the exporting country. We started in Laredo for air cargo shipments from Laredo, Texas Airport to 8 Mexican airports. Then we moved to Mesa de Otay for agriculture goods from Mexico to the U.S., and we are about to start in San Jeronimo, Chihuahua, at the San Jeronimo Industrial Park. But we also started something on a new program recently at different facilities in Arizona, where we have joint cargo inspections on the importing side of the border. Or on the facilities of the importing country. In this case, at CBP's facilities. We started in Nogales, Douglas, and San Luis. In both programs, the cargo pre-inspection and the joint cargo inspections, we are expanding those. We are going through assessments of these programs, of these pilots, and then expanding them. In the case of Laredo, for example, we're going to bring some additional industry sectors. In the case of Otay, the same. We're moving from agriculture to other sectors. And we will do the same in different locations. Then we're planning to move to some U.S. airports as well. So, for example, express courier companies and their customers would benefit a lot if we just pre-inspect these shipments before they arrive to Mexico, in this case. So this program is moving forward, and here are some photos of the facilities. On the left-hand side, you see the Laredo, Texas Airport facilities. On the right-hand side, the Mesa de Otay, Baja California facilities. And on the next one, you'll see our personnel and CBP personnel working together at the same facility. So, and this is a great picture because it shows personnel from both sides at the same place, following exactly the same standards, the same procedures. For each pilot, we develop what we call standard operating procedures, and we've been able to implement it. So it's growing. On data harmonization, this is important because at the end of the day, let's say the cargo inspection and the joint cargo inspection programs are, I would say, easy to sell because they actually impress everyone. Say, okay, we have our customs officers working together at the same facility, and these are great programs. But when we talk about harmonizing our data requirements, these will impact not only the participants of the, let's say, cargo pre-inspection program, but everyone, every carrier, every importer and exporter in between the two countries. We've been harmonizing our manifest, our cargo manifest, and let me start with rail. In the northbound rail, we have harmonized 4 of the 6 ports. The other 2 will be ready in the coming weeks or months. And southbound, U.S. CBP is testing it's out on manifest, and then we will complete this perhaps sometime, or we will start developing the southern manifest this year. In the maritime environment, what we did in Mexico, we just did a cut-paste of the U.S. Maritime Manifest, or Sea Manifest, and we are implementing that in Mexico. Actually, we're already testing this with the shipping lines. So in about 2 months, both countries will have exactly the same Sea Manifest in place. We will have exactly the same data requirements for all shipments coming from all over the world. Same for the air environment. In Mexico, we implemented the Air Cargo Manifest in 2015, the new IATA 2 version. And the U.S. is getting there. Sometime this year, they will have it in place. And we will have a harmonized manifest for air. In truck, we'll start working this year in the northbound environment. We'll do the same as we did for rail and maritime. We will do a cut-paste of the U.S. manifest and insert it as our manifest in Mexico. And the southbound piece, we will work on it in 2018. Another critical component of what we're doing here in customs, it's the mutual recognition of our secure supply chain programs. The U.S. launched its CTPAT program, the Customs Trade Partnership Against Terrorism program, years ago, and we launched our Authorized Economic Operator program a few months or years later. What we agreed to do is to make sure that we will be requiring exactly the same applying or the same standards, so that we will be requiring participants to fulfill exactly the same security requirements. And we achieved that, and so we signed a mutual recognition agreement, and we've been doing joint validations. We've been certifying companies on both sides of the border. And at the end of the day, what we have today is that 41% of Mexican exports to the U.S. are CTPAT AEO certified. That, just to put things in perspective, 41% of Mexican exports to the U.S. account for more than what the U.S. imports from Germany, more than what the U.S. imports from the U.K., France, and Spain combined. This is the volume we're talking about. And this is secure, certified under CTPAT and under the CTPAT AEO programs. Now, as we have both signed a mutual recognition agreement with Canada as well, with the Canada Border Services Agency, CBSA, now we're talking about aligning the three programs in a way that in the very near future, we can move a shipment from Montreal to Monterrey, two cities with the same name in different languages, but at the end of the day, we can smoothly process this truck traveling from Montreal to Monterrey or vice versa under the same program with the same requirements through special lanes and with the same data requirements in cars. So this is something that we'll get there. I don't know if next year or the following year, but soon we'll get there. The next one, David, you already spoke about single window. We launched our single window in 2012, in the U.S. at the end of 2016, in Canada as well. In 2015, 2016, they launched a preliminary single window. The three countries have a single window system now in place. In Mexico, you cannot import or export if it's not through the single window system. And what we're doing now is talking, the three of us, about how can we make this more North American, more interoperable. Is that a word in English? Interoperable? Okay. Yep. I'm sorry. But it's a challenge. I agree with David. It's not something that is going to happen overnight because it will take a long time. And the reason is this. All the elements or all the components of a single window system need to be harmonized before we can claim victory. Let me give you an example. We're harmonizing our cargo manifests, but we also have to harmonize, let's say, our USDA agriculture certificates or permits, everything. We have to harmonize everything that goes into the single window to make sure that, let's say, an exporter of tomatoes from Mexico, as he or she fill their certificate, is that exactly the same data requirements that are required in the US or in Canada, and vice versa? Or apples from Washington State, whatever. It's exactly the same thing. So that's a difficult task, and that will require something that there are two words that no many people in this bureaucracy that we were talking about. Actually, I love when my wife, Patricia, she always talks about, she loves Mafalda. Mafalda, it's the cartoons from Argentina. And Mafalda has a turtle, and the name of the turtle is bureaucracy. So, so when we talk about bureaucracy, I always imagine Mafalda's turtle. So, but the two words are regulatory cooperation. The only way to reach a North American single window is through regulatory cooperation. We have to harmonize the whole enchilada. There's no other way. So we're already starting. I don't know if it's going to take us 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. Is the NAFTA renegotiation an opportunity to work on that? Perhaps. Regulatory cooperation is important if we want to really create a North American single customs platform, let's say. And one thing, I have good news for you. Last year I shared some of this, but we are already implementing PITA. It's not a bread, it's a project in Mexico. PITA means in English something like integrated customs platform systems, etc. Difficult to translate, but anyway. So we'll just call it PITA. PITA is a system that it's being deployed all over the U.S. Mexico border at the Mexican ports of entry and our seaports and our airports and our southern border with Guatemala and Belize. In a nutshell, and at every single entry and exit lane at the customs ports of entry in the country. I'll share with you what we have for cargo. And this will be, we will start deploying this in Tijuana, in Mesa de Otay next month. The system works this way. We have readers that identify, license plate readers and optical character readers and RFID readers. Then we identify the shipment, the driver, the truck, the box, everything. All the data is run through risk management and targeting systems as we do today. But to do that today, we have an officer in the primary booth reading pedimentos, reading customs entries, and then the system works out and determines if the shipment is subject to an inspection. Well, PITA will allow us to turn our primary process into a human-less process. We call it, or I call it, the global entry for trucks. So in the coming months, you'll see in Tijuana, for example, that we are removing our officers from the primary process, and the trucks will enter Mexico just through the system, and the system will determine if the shipment is going to secondary inspection or if it's released. And if it's released, also there's a control at the exit point. So the system would not allow a truck to leave the port if it hasn't been released. And all this information is also concentrated in our command center, etc. So this is coming, and this will reduce the process for every truck to 17 seconds. And in the private vehicle environment, we are already installing some of this at some of the lanes in Tijuana, in San Isidro, as we finish Tijuana, we will move eastwards all the way to Matamoros, Brownsville. And this includes also our southern border and our maritime, our seaports, etc. This is the only way to deal with the growing volumes of trade and to increase security for us. And last but not least, I don't know if you've seen or if you've read this book from Parag Khanna. This is one of the photos that it shows. It's connectography. It's the name of the book. And the subtitle is Mapping the Future of Global Civilization. Mr. Canna shows in his book how this connectivity from in cities, in metropolitan areas, something that what the ambassador was talking about, but also in larger regions like North America. This is the connectography of North America, according to Mr. Canna. And at the end of the day, well, you don't see borders there. But of course, we will have borders. But the idea is to make sure, because this is market-driven, the only way to deal with this is to recognize this reality. And by recognizing this reality, then we can, recognizing this connectivity, this integration, we can then promote growth. Our goals should, we should keep our goals of competitiveness, of prosperity and security. And we have lots of assets, natural, demographic, economic, cultural, social resources, and democratic values in the three countries. So our future, North America's future, depends on us, only on us. And the way, or the role that we play as customs or transportation authorities, it's to make sure that this connectography works well, in a secure way, in a safe way, in an expeditious way. And this is something that we've been working also for years. One element on top of all of this is our joint efforts on risk management and targeting. There are two persons here in this room that are some of our analysts at the National Targeting Center here in Virginia. I'm not going to point out to them. But this is a work that we do jointly with CBP, and this is a work that we're proud of doing with CBP that has shown excellent results in seizing narcotics and IPR violations and many things. So we should continue that way, because the more we invest in this, the safer North America, a much more secure North America, will be a more competitive North America at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jose. Well, thank you all. In fact, I think we're going to go right to questions from the group, because I know Jose has to go catch an airplane pretty soon. So I'm sure a lot of you have thought of questions along the way. Please, right here in the center. Maybe identify yourself before you ask the question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Ramiro Gonzalez with the city of Brownsville. I don't know if this is the best panel to ask this question, but I feel that the conversation today has been a lot about cargo and a lot about trade and everything that we're doing to connect both countries seamlessly. However, I think that, living on the border, we've never been more separate culturally. Nobody, and a lot of people that live on in the Texas side, they don't cross to the Mexican side. So I'd kind of like to get your thought on that, and how we can use maybe some of these thoughts to bridge that cultural divide that's starting to occur.
Okay, absolutely. Look, and that's a great question, because I spoke about transformation. We have transformed the border from what it used to be, but let's go back to what it used to be. Growing up in South Texas, going to Reynosa was a day trip. I don't want my mom to hear this, but Friday evenings I used to live in Reynosa, and so did the rest of my friends. It was nothing to pick up the family. This is when we were young, very young, obviously 18, 19 years old, and go to Reynosa to a restaurant and have a great dinner, and come back very quickly. It was nothing to go as a kid to the river, to the Rio Grande, and fish and alligator gar. We used to have alligator gar, and we used to make chicharrones out of them. You can't do that nowadays. And that nowadays started about, well, I'll tell you exactly when it started. It started when the U.S. government, rightfully so, ramped up its efforts in South Florida because of the cocaine and marijuana smuggling that was going there. We ramped it up under George H.W. Bush as vice president. And what happened? It shifted over to South Texas, literally overnight, okay? At that time, we weren't really well schooled in dealing with these cartels, criminal organizations, transnational crime, and things of that nature. we are now well schooled, and when I say we, I'm talking we, binationally, because now we know how to react. So what we're living with today, that cultural divide of my family does not go into Reynosa anymore, and that's almost embarrassing to say. They want to go, they'd love to go. The people that live in McAllen, I'm sure the same way, Mayor, that they'd love to go. But unfortunately, that is being impacted by the criminal activity that is happening south of the border. But having said that, let me just take a step back here because I think this is important. So when we talk about terror, what is the probability of terror really happening right now along our border with Mexico? It's possible, but the probability is very low. But if it happens once, the impact is going to be extremely high. You talk about shutting down the borders. That's going to go like that. That's why we're so focused on it. So let's deal with that. And then we got migration. Migration has a high interest. Probability is it exists. It has a high interest. But look at the impact that it's having on our countries, plural. Migration, and by the way, it's the lowest it's been in 45 years, I think. Lowest it's been in 45 years. But the policy actions taking on that high interest is part of what's causing that cultural divide. And then you take a look at the transnational crime. That is really impacting what you're referring to there. So it's amazing to me that some of these things, how they impact our culture, our ability to conduct trade and things of that nature. And this is an interesting point. Transnational crime builds that cultural divide. But the outstanding work that has been done by our countries, by our trade, by our mayors, by our governors on the border, what has it done to trade? Trade has skyrocketed. Now it needs to go higher because we all know it can go higher. But our focus on cargo, on supply chain, on AEO programs, anti-terror, that's what we've done in the enforcement realm very, very well. All that to say, how do we move from the enforcement realm? And actually, I'm seeing Governor Ducey, I'm seeing Mayor Darling, I'm seeing some of the other states and mayors focus on how do we get that? How do we get from what we did in law enforcement to bringing the cultural divide, to closing that cultural divide? We've got to focus on it. It's not going to be easy, but we've got to focus on it. Take a look at what's happening in Coahuila today as we speak. Jose, we spoke about this very briefly yesterday. Coahuila, the populace is standing up to not accepting well, it's not the results, I guess, of the voting, but how they got to where they got. They're standing up for what is right. That's outstanding. And when you somebody mentioned Corona earlier, I don't know if a representative is here, but they're right in the middle of that fight. So what comes out of that fight is going to be very impacting to trade and so forth. So I would urge us to not to be linear on looking at the border. It's not just security. It's not just facilitation. It's culture, bringing us back to where we came from. There was a lot of good there. There was a lot of bad, but there was a lot of good, and we need to now just move forward holistically.
Thank you.
I just want to add to that. As we were sitting here talking about the negotiations going on between our countries, and this is probably given all the years I spent on the Hill, but we can sit as governments and talk all we want. But one of the privileges of living in a democracy is that we don't get to just stay in those squares. We have a whole populace in Canada, in the United States, and in Mexico that sometimes has some very strong feelings about this. And at FMCSA, we probably see it not so much from we are concerned about security and terror, but we probably get hit more with the economic concerns. And so part of what you all can do in this room is help to get out that message, that this is actually, if we have streamlined trade, if we can grow trade between our countries, that helps all of us. And so I think when people realize that does also help to break down the cultural barriers as well.
Very quickly. I think we have to work very hard in constructing a relationship of understanding and respect. To achieve understanding, we have to spread the word. We have to let people know, people that do not know these things on both sides, because it's very bad, the rhetoric that you hear on one side, as is bad when you hear the public in the Aztec Stadium whistling or booing the U.S. national anthem. It's exactly the same. And it's a matter of understanding better both sides. In respect, I mean, there are differences, and there will be differences. But by understanding each other, we will then promote that respect, and by seeing what we've been building in all these years and protecting that, we can expand and we can get deeper and deeper in that relationship. There's not only economic integration, there's deep social integration between the two countries. So we have to keep working very hard in building understanding and respect.
Exactly. One more question. Right down here in front, please.
Thank you. Patricia Camila Ham. I'm from the U.S. Mexico Border Security Policy Network. My question is for Mr. Aguilar. President Trump has, talked about this wall to impede the crossing of illicit flows into the U.S. Given that most of the illicit drugs are smuggled through the points of entry, not in between the points of entry, what would you recommend to the U.S. and Mexican government that they could do to reduce those illicit flows?
Well, a couple of things. I am not sure that I agree that most drugs are smuggled through the ports of entry. A vast majority of them are. But a lot of good work is being done by Mexico and the U.S. jointly to mitigate the capabilities of drug smugglers bringing drugs in through the ports of entry. Now, the massive movement creates opportunity. But there's a lot of other areas that we need to look at as to how the drugs are making it into the country. Maritime ports, air, all of these things come into play. And there is a massive amount of drugs brought between the ports of entry also. So, and I'm not going to go into detail on where I believe everything is happening, but to your question, at the ports of entry, it gets back to technology, technology, technology. Technology supported by information, data, and agreements that will allow those officers to segment risk on the flow of the supply chain and manage the risk that they now have a fuller view of, a situational awareness of the risk that we face at the ports of entry. One of the problems that we face with technology, and again, I believe technology is going to be the key here, is you have a tremendous amount of volume anytime that volume capability. You have a tremendous velocity that you face when all the ingesting is done of that information. You have the availability of variety of information that comes from Mexico, now it's coming from Canada, now it's coming from our fellow agencies and organizations that we work with, it's coming from associations, now it's coming from government, from the states. So there's a tremendous amount of volume, velocity, and variety of information. How we extract the value of that to mitigate that risk is what's so critical right now. We haven't gotten there yet. And the capabilities are there. I've seen it. A lot of us have seen it. But that can only be successful, two things. You've got to apply the technology. You've got to buy it. There's got to be appropriations. Look at what Mexico is doing. That's outstanding. But that's but one piece. And by the way, if I was Jose's boss or Jose's boss's boss, I'd be asking, get that from 17 minutes to 17 seconds to 7 seconds. And as soon as you got that, I want it down to 1 second. So it's the appropriations, the technology, the focus, and the agreements between the two countries so that we can mitigate that risk. Now, let me move from the ports very quickly to between the ports. Between the ports, the sovereignty of our nations, Mexico and the U.S., is absolutely critical. The respect for that sovereignty, respect for the culture, respect for the people, that's where we have to get started. Mayor Darling, and I hope I'm going to capture this correctly, you have supported the infrastructure, the wall, at the levees, because that helps both Mexico, the U.S., and the floodplains out there. But I'm sure the mayor doesn't want it along the entirety of the border there. Neither do I. So, but it is not just the wall. It is the technology, it is the situational awareness, it is the common operating picture, it is the joint efforts between Mexico and the U.S., it is the ability to effectively mitigate the bad organizations' ability to operate in the way that they do. So again, it's that holistic approach. There is no one silver bullet that's going to do the job.
Okay. Thank you, David. Thank you, Randy. Thank you, Jose, very much. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thanks again to all of our panelists. We're running a bit behind schedule here. If you need to take a break, feel free to do so. But we do have Commissioner McAleenan, Acting Commissioner McAleenan of CBP is here. So we're going to move pretty quickly to the next panel. Stand up for just 1 second while we transition, and we'll keep moving on. Thanks.
Hopefully that conversation.
Master, thank you so much. No, appreciate being here.